The sound of tearing paper isn't loud, not really. It's a quiet, ripping noise, like someone clearing their throat in a library. But in my father's study, it sounded like gunshots. Whip, whip, whip. I stood with my back pressed against the bookshelf, watching Joseph, my father, methodically destroy 3 years of my life. My graphic design portfolio. The high-resolution prints, the branding concepts, the sketches I'd stayed up until 4 in the morning to perfect. All of it was turning into confetti on his mahogany floor. He didn't look angry. That was the worst part. He looked bored, like he was shredding junk mail. "You missed the casting call," he said. His voice calm, almost conversational. He dropped a handful of my shredded thesis project into the wastebasket. "Brooklyn needed that ride, Vivian. She needed you. And because you were too selfish to drive her across town, she missed her slot." "I had a deadline," I whispered, my voice sounding thin and pathetic in the large room. "I told you." I told her. "I have an interview today." He stopped then. He looked at me, really looked at me with eyes that were cold and flat. "An interview for what?" "More of this." He gestured to the pile of scraps on the floor. "This isn't a career, Vivian. Sahabi. Brooklyn is the one with the future. She is the star of this family. You are just the crew. And the crew doesn't get to have deadlines. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." I didn't wait for him to finish. I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't slam the door. I just walked, my car keys digging into my palm so hard they left red marks. I got into my 10-year-old sedan, the one with the check engine light that had been on since Christmas, and I drove. Not to the mall. Not to apologize to Brooklyn. I drove toward the city, toward Aura Design Strategy. Toward the only thing I had left that felt like mine. As the miles blurred past, I started doing the math. Not design math, but family math. The kind I'd been doing in my head since I was 12. Last month, Brooklyn needed a new laptop for her vlogging channel. A $2,800 MacBook Pro. My father bought it without blinking. "It's an investment," he'd said. Meanwhile, I was drawing on a used sketchpad I bought with tips from my night shifts at the diner because my father said art supplies were a waste of household resources. 3 months ago, Brooklyn needed headshots. $3,500 for a photographer who captured her essence. I paid my own dental bill that same week because my mother said money was a little tight right now. It wasn't tight. It was never tight for the star. It was only tight for the crew. I used to wonder why I stayed. Why I let them treat me like an ATM with a pulse. But as I merged onto the highway, I realized it wasn't because I was weak. It was because they were smart. They didn't start with the big things. They started small. A missed birthday here. Borrowed paycheck there. A little guilt trip about how family helps family. It's like that old story about the frog in boiling water. If you drop a frog in a pot of boiling water, it jumps out. But if you put it in cold water and slowly turn up the heat, it stays. It adjusts its body temperature to match the water. Thinks the warmth is normal. Thinks the heat is just how life is. Until it's too late. Until it's cooked. My parents had been turning up the heat for 27 years. They normalized the cruelty so slowly, so methodically, that I stopped noticing the burn. I thought my exhaustion was my fault. I thought my poverty was my failure. I thought my role as the servant was just the price of admission for being loved. But watching my portfolio turn into trash on the floor, that was the water boiling over. That was the moment the frog realized it wasn't swimming. It was dying. I pulled into the parking lot of Aura Design. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red. My blouse was wrinkled from the stress sweating. I looked like a mess. But beneath the panic, there was something else. Something cold and hard and new. I wasn't going back. Not today. Not ever. I walked into the building. The receptionist looked at me with a polite, confused smile. "Vivian, you're here for the junior designer interview." "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. I walked into Patricia's office. Patricia was a legend in the industry. Senior art director. She didn't smile. She just looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "You're late," she said. "I know," I said. "I had a structural failure at home." Open my bag. I didn't have my portfolio. I had a few loose pages I'd managed to snatch from the floor before I ran. They were crinkled. One had a tear down the middle. I laid them on her pristine glass desk. "This is what survived," I said. Patricia looked at the torn pages. Then she looked at me. She didn't look pitying. She looked curious. "What happened?" she asked. "My father didn't like my priorities," I said. "He thought I should be driving my sister to an audition instead of coming here." Patricia picked up one of the drawings. It was a logo concept for a sustainable energy firm. She traced the tear in the paper with her finger. "You have talent," she said. "But talent is cheap. Resilience is expensive. If you can create this," she tapped the paper, "while living in a war zone, imagine what you can do when you have a desk and a paycheck." She put the paper down. "You're hired," she said. "Trial period. 3 months. Don't make me regret it." I walked out of that office feeling like I was floating. Had a job. Real job. With a salary. I drove back to my parents' house one last time. Not to apologize. I expected them to be sorry. I expected my father to be cooling off, maybe even a little embarrassed about his tantrum. I walked into the living room and stopped. Rebecca, my mother, was sitting on the couch with Brooklyn. Brooklyn was crying loud, theatrical sobs that involved no actual tears. "You ruined everything." Brooklyn screamed when she saw me. "I missed the casting call. That was my big break, Vivian. My agent is furious." "Where have you been?" my mother demanded. She stood up, her face tight with anger. "Your sister is devastated. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I went to my interview," I said. "Your interview?" My father walked in from the kitchen. He looked at me with pure disgust. "We told you to cancel that. You disobeyed us, you upset your sister, and you disrespected this family. I hope you're happy." "I got the job," I said. "I don't care," he yelled. "You are going to apologize to your sister right now. You are going to drive her to the agency and beg them to see her. And then you are going to pay for her rescheduling fees." I looked at them. Really looked at them. My mother, enabling the tantrums. My father, the tyrant. My sister, the eternal victim. "No," I said. The room went silent. "Excuse me." My father stepped forward. "No," I repeated. "I'm not driving her. I'm not paying. And I'm not apologizing. The crew is resigning." I walked past them, up the stairs and into my room. I grabbed my duffel bag. I threw in my clothes, my laptop, my toiletries. I didn't fold anything. I just stuffed it in. "If you walk out that door," my father shouted from the bottom of the stairs, "don't you dare come back. You are cut off. You hear me? Cut off." I zipped the bag. I walked down the stairs. I didn't look at them. I opened the front door and walked out into the cool evening air. "Vivian," my mother called after me. "You won't last a week." Got in my car. I started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I didn't feel sad. Felt light. I felt like I could finally breathe. I drove to my friend Sarah's house. She let me sleep on her couch. For 3 weeks, that couch was my home. I threw myself into my work at Aura. I was the first one in and the last one out. I ate vending machine dinners and saved every penny. When my first paycheck hit my account, I stared at the number on the screen for 10 minutes. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. Every single cent. No family tax. No Brooklyn Needs headshots deduction. Felt rich. I started looking for apartments. Nothing fancy. Just a studio where I could lock the door and know that nobody was going to storm in and tear up my life. I found a place in a quiet neighborhood. The rent was reasonable. The landlord seemed nice. I filled out the application with a flourish. Employer. Salary. I handed it over with a smile, feeling like a real adult. The next day, the leasing agent called me. Her voice was different. Colder. "Ms. Vivian," she said. We've reviewed your application. I'm afraid we can't approve you. Why? I asked, confused. My income is 3 times the rent. My references are solid. It's your credit report, she said. Your debt-to-income ratio is. Well, it's impossible. We can't rent to someone with that kind of liability. Debt? I laughed nervously. I don't have any debt. I paid off my student loans last year. I drive a 10-year-old car. Ms. Vivian, the agent said, her voice dropping to a hush. You have over $60,000 in outstanding loans and credit card debt. Most of it is in collections. The phone slipped in my hand. The world tilted. That's a mistake, I whispered. It's all here, she said. I suggest you pull your full report. Hung up. I went to my laptop. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I went to the credit bureau website. I entered my social security number. Paid the fee. The report loaded. It was pages long. Credit cards I'd never seen. Department store cards. Personal line of credit. All maxed out. All in default. And then, at the bottom, the biggest blow. Small business loan. $48,000. Taken out 2 years ago. My name. For a company called J&R Ventures. J&R, Joseph and Rebecca. My parents. They hadn't just stolen my money. They hadn't just stolen my labor. They had stolen my name. They had taken out a federal loan to cover my father's failing investment schemes. And they had pinned the liability on me. I sat there on Sarah's couch, staring at the screen. The numbers blurred. $48,000. This wasn't just bad credit. This was felony fraud. I realized then that my father hadn't been protecting the family empire. He had been using me as a human shield. He knew his business was failing. He knew his credit was shot. So he used mine. He burned his own daughter to keep himself warm. I didn't cry this time. The tears were gone. Replaced by a cold, clinical rage. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a crime scene. I printed the report. Every single page. I put it in a folder. Then I picked up my phone and texted my mother. We need to talk. I'm ready to come home. 'Twas a lie. But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. They agreed to meet me at a diner halfway between our houses. Neutral ground. Or so they thought. I arrived early. Picked a booth in the back. I ordered a coffee and waited. They walked in 10 minutes late. My father looked smug. My mother looked relieved. They thought they had won. They thought the crew had realized she couldn't survive without the captain. Well, my father said as he slid into the booth. Look who decided to grow up. I'm glad you called, Vivian, my mother said, reaching for a menu. We were worried about you. But you have to understand, you can't just run away when things get tough. We're willing to let you come back, my father said, leaning back and crossing his arms. But there are conditions. You pay rent. You apologize to your sister. And you drive her whenever she needs it. No more work conflicts. Family comes first. I watched them. I watched the way they preened. The way they ordered me around like I was an unruly employee. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the folder. I didn't say a word. I just slid it across the table. What's this? My father asked, frowning. Open it, I said. He did. The credit report stared back at him. Highlighted loans, cards, $48,000 in my name. His face didn't fall. It hardened. Where did you get this? He hissed. It's public record, Dad. It's my record. You had no right snooping in family business. He snapped the folder shut. Family business. I laughed, sharp as glass. That's my social security number. You committed federal fraud. You stole my identity. I did what I had to, he shouted, drawing stairs. For this family. For the empire. You think that house pays for itself. Your sister's career is free. I made sacrifices. You sacrificed me, I said. You used my credit because yours was trash. You buried me in debt before I even started. Don't be dramatic, Mom cut in. We were going to pay it back. Eventually. Eventually. I tapped the report. It's in collections. Defaulted. You weren't paying anything. Dad leaned forward, voice low and poisonous. If you breathe a word of this, I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone you're unstable. I'll say you authorized it. Who will they believe? The successful businessman or the ungrateful daughter? I looked at him and saw it clearly for the first time. Not a patriarch, not a giant. A small, frightened man in a cheap suit, clinging to a costume. People like my father think money is power. Car, house, golden child, they rent an identity and call it worth. Take away the credit lines and the status, and what's left? No integrity, no love, just fear of being exposed. He wasn't powerful. He was a parasite. And parasites survive only while the host stays quiet. I'm not the host anymore, I said. What? I'm done. Understood. I'm not coming home. I'm not paying rent. And I'm not keeping your secrets. Voice shook. Where are you going? To the police station. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a goodbye. I walked out while he shouted my name, already fading into background noise. I drove straight to the precinct and filed the report. The fallout came fast. The investigation triggered an IRS audit. Turns out the loan fraud was only part of it. Dad hadn't paid taxes in 5 years. 2 weeks later he was arrested for identity theft, bank fraud, and tax evasion. Mom was named an accomplice. Half the paperwork carried her signature. The house, their empire, was seized. Brooklyn called me screaming about headshots and where she'd live. Get a job, I said and hung up. 6 months later I sat in my own apartment. Small, bright mine. My name was clean and on the lease. At Aura, I'd been promoted to lead designer after landing the sustainable energy account. That night my work was featured in a gallery show called Modern Resilience. Torn sketches, shredded documents, and old credit reports woven into something new and strong. Patricia and my friends were there. My chosen family. My phone buzzed. A text from Brooklyn. Not an apology but humility. She asked for help fixing her resume. Sure, I typed. Send it over. Because sometimes you have to ask. Are you family, or are you fuel? You don't owe anyone your fire. Walking away felt like amputation, but it saved my life. If you're standing at that door, this is your sign. Cut the line, drop the load, and walk. The life you want is on the other side.